I just love the item that I read about it. Commissioner Goodell will politely decline the invitation. What a nice way to say GFY. Welcome to Wait What? Sports Biz Chat with DP and McGee, the podcast where we take a sometimes irreverent, sometimes cynical, and yes, even a sometimes serious look at the business of sports. I'm your co-host, Tim McGee.
And I'm David 𝗠𝗏.
David, we come on the air now to record the morning of the first game of the NBA Finals. We had the first game of the Stanley Cup Finals last night. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm guessing you're going to be glued to the TV tonight, as will I, watching the beginning of what I'm hopeful will be kind of an epic series. So we'll kind of get to that. A few things on my mind as we're starting the NBA Finals, and we have Game 1 now under our belts on the Stanley Cup Final with the Vegas Golden Knights taking a 1-0 lead over the Carolina Hurricanes. I want to start with baseball, even though we're not at the midway point of the season. All the opening shots have been fired in the labor negotiation, something that we've known will be a steady story over the course of this year. And I think every indication supports, one of the predictions you came out with, that this is going to be potentially a fairly drawn-out fight, and it could lead to work stoppage or potentially even games missed. We obviously hope that's not the case. But the positions that have been carved out formally now are exactly what we expected that they would be. I don't think anything is unexpected. Commissioner Rob Manfred is out on somewhat of a media tour, trying to, I think, curry favor in their side. And both sides have legitimate points in this, right? I think the idea that the disparity between the highest paying teams and the lowest paying teams is vast. And we now have a two-time, I think the Dodgers are probably favored to win a third straight World Series right now with as loaded as they are. But by the same token, the Mets are also a top paying team, and they are at the bottom of the National League East. The Guardians aren't the highest paying team, but they continue to do rather well. The Brewers are middle of the pack. They continue to do rather well. So that argument, I think, while a valid one, is one that could be countered. Of course, the league has come out with a hard cap situation. I took a look at it, and I think the number is $243 million as the hard cap, with the floor that's pretty aggressive. There are about 10 teams, I think, that are paying above that number right now. And there are teams currently paying below the floor that's been offered. The Marlins, White Sox, Nationals, Rays, and the A's, not surprising to anyone that those teams are on there. So, I think this is the start of something. They're both carving out their position. Players are against any sort of cap. They're saying it would decrease the competitive balance, and that their line is, and it's not an invalid one, saying that this isn't a cap to protect their spending as much as it is to protect their own mediocrity in running organizations.
I read a statistic that the Players Association put out that under the new proposed system, players would have lost in aggregate $500 million. That's a significant amount of money. There's arguments to be made for both sides, right? They are the only North American league that does not have a salary cap right now. And I'm sure we'll be talking momentarily about the NBA playoffs. There hasn't been a repeat champion in the NBA since the Golden State Warriors in 2017 and 2018, right? And they have a hard cap. Football, every team, absent the New York Jets, has a chance of winning a Super Bowl because not only the salary cap, but the shared media revenue. Hockey has had a couple of teams that have won 2 in a row, most recently Florida, but they didn't even make the playoffs this year. So there are teams that are, there's 2 teams this year. you have to admire what Las Vegas has done. This is their 9th season, and they've been tremendously successful over that time, including, making a Stanley Cup Finals, winning a Stanley Cup championship, Stanley Cup, being up 1-0 now. A lot more can happen, but still, they've been an incredibly successful franchise. I don't think the current financial system in baseball is sustainable, but I don't know what the answer is, because the salary cap is one thing that seems very, very difficult to overcome as a bargaining issue. Not saying impossible, but very difficult.
Right. We know that the Players Association is, and has always in baseball, been dead set against having any sort of cap, right? But to get to that point, are there other ways to, because clearly any sort of, tax situation that they've put on hasn't stopped the Dodgers or the Mets or the other teams that have gone over that from spending. And the model obviously has worked for the Dodgers. It hasn't worked for other teams. But the disparity from top to bottom is $446 million.
Yeah,
that's massive.
I would be very reluctant to use the Mets as an example of saying, money doesn't buy you everything. You still need good baseball people in the right positions to scout, to develop, to identify, right, players. You have to have the right team chemistry, the right manager, all of these things. So I wouldn't use that as a reason not to have a salary cap. And that's not a knock on the Mets. It is, but it's not intended to be, if that makes sense. But it's got to be very difficult to be a Pittsburgh Pirates fan, to be a Kansas City Royals fan, to play in these, Milwaukee has had some success over the last few years, but these are not major markets, and it's difficult to match spending. Teams like Milwaukee should get, a lot of credit for putting a great product on the field, despite being in small media markets.
Right. No, I think all of those points are great. Baseball has had this weird situation where you're able to prove the opposite of what a normal, sports league economic breakdown would give you. Because both sides could look to these situations. And I don't think the Mets are the Mets aren't a complete anomaly. There are other situations that count. The Brewers aren't a complete anomaly. There are other, teams that I think have tended to perform fairly well.
Yes.
I think this it's not going to be a easy situation for them to fall. I think everybody understands some sanity needs to be brought to this to create long-term competitive balance in the league. That's a standard economic principle I think we can all agree on. And are there ways to get to it to give the players what they need in lieu of a hard cap? And if there are solutions that help lead to that, will the owners ever give up on that hard cap, or will it just say this is the time we're going and we're locking out?
Listen, there's a lot of negotiations to go on. The deal isn't up until December. Hopefully cooler heads will prevail. I'm not a Chicken Little that says the sky is falling. If there's a sustained work stoppage, baseball will be dead. But what I will say is that if you look back at virtually every work stoppage in every league, it does damage to the league. It does damage to attendance, sponsorship, viewership, all of these things. And this is going to be Rob Manfred's last collective bargaining agreement, right, that he'll negotiate. He went to the School of Industrial and Labor Relations at Cornell, so ostensibly this is what he was
his thing.
Made
it's going
to
be
do.
His legacy, though, right? This is going to be the thing
that was my point. It will be his legacy, and I'm not saying he will roll over to, save labor peace, but he will want to go out on a high note and not be the guy who, stopped the second World Series in history.
Right.
Speaking of commissioners, Commissioner Roger Goodell was invited to testify before the House Judiciary Committee later this month, next week actually, by Chairman Jim Jordan, a Republican out of Ohio. I just love the item that I read about it. Commissioner Goodell will politely decline the invitation. What a nice way to say GFY.
Well, the interesting thing will be is how far this goes and whether they'll end up subpoenaing him eventually, because it's a topic, and you're going to be surprised by what I'm about to say, I think. But there are reasons that Congress gets involved in things, and I think with what's being batted around about potential reopening and renegotiation of these things, based on the act that's in place that gives the NFL and other leagues these antitrust exemptions, is a valid one. Jim
I
Jordan
agree.
aside.
There are two things. One is inevitable, which is that more and more live sports will go to streaming services. Of that I have no doubt. The other thing is there will more likely than not be more consolidation in the media industry. When you look at like the Paramount deal and things like that, a lot of that will be dependent on the administration in place and the feeling towards antitrust implications of the Justice Department and the FCC and so forth. But, football has always been available to people to watch over the air at no cost. And that is changing. And you're right. This is a role that Congress can play.
Yeah.
I'm not confident that they're up to the task, but it is a role they should be playing.
No, you're totally right about that, because those are two definitely separate things. But the act that gives these leagues these exemptions is 1961 Broadcast Act, Sports Broadcasting Act. And definitely things have changed there. Now, in the NFL's favor, what they'll argue is all games in home markets are available over the air, free of charge.
Yes.
It was supposed to be all games available for free. I mean, that was kind of the basis of this. The other thing that I think is tied to this now, you wonder why streamers become so important. And obviously a big piece of it is they're the ones with the money. They're the ones with the market capitalizations that can pay more and more and more, making things like Fox and CBS have to go beg Congress to act on things like this. So there's some thought that this was a Murdoch, created thing, and Jim Jordan's here is saying, get him in front of this. By the way, the other person supposedly coming down to speak on behalf of, I think, fans is 𝘐𝘯𝘪𝘏, which is interesting. But we can talk about that at another point. But there is another one of these carriage fights going on right now with DirecTV and E.W. Scripps, who owns a lot of stations across the board, ABC, NBC, and others. And they're also in the business of broadcasting local rights, so they have conflicted interests. But going to streamers, particularly Apple, Amazon, Netflix, that takes that out of the equation. And I don't think the league wants that hassle either. So that's another big thing in the favor of looking at the streamers more long term. Now, does it make sense to not be on one of the networks? But to your point about consolidation, what will consolidation mean 10 years down the road? Will there even be these traditional broadcast networks that we have in place right now or have known all our lives?
I used to say when I was at AT&T and we were negotiating deals that I wished I was the head of sponsorships at a company like Hershey's, because I was reasonably certain that the definition of a candy bar would not change from one deal to the other. But technology moving so quickly in the media space means that it's very difficult to even contemplate what the marketplace will look like from one deal to the next, no less to memorialize it in a contract.
I think it is hard to say that we're serving the interest of the fans. Yes, they're creating a product, and let's focus this on the NFL because Goodell being asked to speak in front of the Judiciary Committee is creating a variety of places that people can see. I mean, I think anyone that really looks at it recognizes that this isn't about the fan and it isn't about choice. It's about taking the money where they know they can get it. And are they going to continue to split it up further? Again, increasing their chance to be able to take a smaller piece and sell it to someone at a premium, take another smaller piece and keep breaking it up that way to maximize profit for the league and, of course, valuations for the ownership. I don't think anyone could look at that and argue that that is absolutely serving the fans and the viewers of the sport, even though the hardcore fans will find it. And, I don't know what the percentage of people in the U.S. population that are Prime members, but it's a pretty good number. And same with Netflix. But serving the fan, not about that.
That's a tough argument to make. If you're Roger Goodell, and I just want to make this one last point, and then we can take a break. If you're Roger Goodell and you go in and you're invited to appear in front of Congress, and you're not going to be under oath, that doesn't mean that the members of that committee may not take what you say and then utilize it in the future when you are subpoenaed and when you are under oath and you're answering these questions, and they can use it to help craft the legislation that they let's assume for a second Congress can actually get to that point, which I don't necessarily believe my own assertion, but they can take what he says and they can use it to craft legislation that they think is in the best interest of the American people, but Goodell and other commissioners and leagues may not think it's in their best interest. So It doesn't serve him to come and appear in front of Congress.
No, I tend to agree with that. And listen, there are a lot of powerful owners that he works for that have pretty good ins with both Congress and the executive branch for sure. But to their credit, they're responding to constituencies. But I think your point is great. Are there updates to what has been given to date that modernize the law, that do support what the fans need and expect and should get out of sports leagues, while continuing to give the league the ability to market the television rights on a national basis, meaning kind of they're the single people negotiating what those rights are. So, I think that's a good point. I think in a perfect world, your thought is right, and that they can craft some things that update, that are smart, that don't crush the NFL necessarily, but support what they need out of what their constituents are looking for them to do in terms of creating legislation that's fair and right. So with that, let's take a break. We will be right back.
It's time for our guest.
Authentic Brands Group is a brand management firm representing the IP of some of the world's most iconic brands, historic entertainment figures, and athletes. And we're thrilled to welcome as our guest this week, Colin Smeaton, who in 2023 launched Authentic Studios to further build on its impressive portfolio of assets. Now, prior to taking on this current role, Colin served as Authentic's West Coast president, and prior to joining Authentic, Colin served in leadership roles at sports talent agencies, including PR Partners, Prism, Agassi Enterprises, and SFX Sports, earning a reputation as one of the business's top tennis agents. Colin, welcome to Wait What?
Well, that was a great intro. Thank you, David. Good
How
to
about
see you
that?
again. And Tim, nice to meet you.
You too.
And it
David's
is
very good at making introductions.
Yeah,
He makes
that was great.
It's always that's what I bring to this show, is what Tim is saying. It's also always great to have a friend and a former colleague on as well. So you, as I mentioned, you launched Authentic Studios a couple years ago. Would love to just get the backstory on how this came about and what you're utilizing Authentic Studios for in furthering the business of authentic brands.
Yeah. So look, I've always been in the entertainment world. When I was working with the talent, I was always sort of interested in film and TV, but we were really my days when I was in Vegas with Perry Rogers. We were sort of putting these TV shows together, putting movies together. But we were functioning just as like non-writing EP, right? We were basically coming up with a creative, putting the show together. We would sell it, and then we would manage the talent and have that show come together. But we weren't producers on it, really, in the true entertainment sense. We were based in Las Vegas, and it was obviously difficult to really be immersed in the entertainment business if you're not living in LA or New York. So I kind of always had experience doing it. I always had a real interest in doing it. And when I moved to LA in 2020, when we got out of COVID, we started really wanting to grow the entertainment side of the business. That was sort of the reason why I took the job. Jamie Salter, our CEO and founder, said, look, I think the entertainment is the growth engine of the company, and we don't have a presence in LA. Would you be interested in doing it? So I took the job and, was really running the business development of the entertainment division at the time. And that was like the estates of Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, Muhammad Ali. Shaquille was the first living personality that Authentic had invested in. Perry and I did that deal in 2015. So 𝘐𝘯𝘴𝘪𝘠 was the first living personality. In 2019 is when we bought Sports Illustrated. 2019 was sort of like I would say a year that, Authentic Brands Group became a little bit more mainstream. People knew who they were. We bought two sort of iconic brands that year. Sports Illustrated was one, and then Barney's, the retail store, was another. These were two brands that had just like massive, passionate, I would call them fan bases. I mean, they people had like a very, very emotional attachment to these brands. So people sort of knew who we were. And so obviously our company is a licensing company. We are really a platform, licensing is one of the outputs that we provide from a business model standpoint. But, we are the second largest licensing company behind Disney. We'll do almost $40 billion in licensing revenue. So our old model was, okay, if you have this IP of, Elvis and Marilyn Monroe and Muhammad Ali or Sports Illustrated, if someone wanted to make a film or TV show, they would come and they would basically option the rights to the name, image, and likeness to make that film or TV show or musical. So like, for instance, the Elvis movie with Warner Brothers that Baz Luhrmann directed, that they optioned that in 2014. The movie came out in 2022. So the difference between the company in 2014 to 2022 was incredible. Like we were by 2022, we were this massive licensing company. And when the movie came out, we were invited to the premiere at the Cannes Film Festival. And I'm sitting in the mezzanine with our CEO and founder, Jamie Salter, and Corey Salter, who's our CEO of entertainment, and Mark Rosen. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, Jamie, this is just wrong. Like we are guests here and we're seeing our IP on this giant screen. And we were involved creatively to a certain degree, but we really weren't. It was a little risky. Like, we trusted Baz. We were involved with Baz, but we're not to the level that we really needed to be given, the risk or the opportunity for the Elvis Presley brand. So I said, we should no longer be licensing our IP in the entertainment space. We should be developing and we should be producing and co-producing stuff around our IP. And we should create our own studio. And he's like, you know what? You're right. Great idea. Go figure it out. At that same time, I'd already had this idea. 𝘐𝘯𝘴𝘪𝘠 really wanted to scale his production company. We were doing the production for his commercial production, and he really wanted to then go further into film and TV. We had just invested in partnering with David Beckham's business. He had his own production company, Studio 99, based out of London. We had licensed out Sports Illustrated to a company called 101 Studios. 101 Studios does all the Yellowstone, Taylor Sheridan universe. Massive company, unbelievable in the scripted space. So I had the ability to take that license back. So overnight, I said, okay, we're going to build Authentic Studios. And Authentic Studios is going to have 4 production companies inside of it. It's going to have 𝘐𝘯𝘴𝘪𝘠's production company, Jersey Legends, where we're going to do the commercial production for his partners, and then film and TV with him on camera or as a EP on a various story. Like if we wanted to produce the Allen Iverson documentary, it would be produced by 𝘐𝘯𝘴𝘪𝑠's production company. David Beckham's production company, Studio 99, was the second label. We created Sports Illustrated Studios, mining the 70 years of archives that we wanted to tell those stories, both scripted and non-scripted. And then the fourth label, at the time, I kind of just was like a collection of all the other brands, Elvis, Marilyn, Muhammad Ali, or any of the retail brands, the lifestyle brands that we owned. We own over 60 brands. And that I called Authentic Productions. So, but all of that made up Authentic Studios. And so I set off to basically say, we have enough IP here that we don't need to look outside of these walls. We should just try to find compelling stories that we can tell around our brands that don't have to be, commercials or whitewashed. But if we tell a good enough story, the brand should get a lift from a marketing standpoint and ultimately from a business development standpoint. So yeah, in 2026, we've had some I would say pretty successful projects. David Beckham, his documentary won the Emmy. We've had 5 Emmy nominations. We had our first feature film with Baz Luhrmann called Epic, Elvis Presley Concert, which did almost $30 million at the box office. So my mandate now with my team is to basically say what compelling content, creative, that we can create around our IP that we could get on a global platform that'll be a marketing vehicle and or business development.
Colin, you talked about the massive reach of Authentic Brands Group. 60 brands, global, and obviously your relationships extend well beyond sports. But because this is ostensibly a sports business podcast, we want to focus on the sports side. Can you give us an idea of some of the sports properties you represent and how you work with them to build and monetize those brands? Obviously, Sports Illustrated is probably one of the most well-known.
F5 will be the biggest.
Yeah.
In terms of like just true sports, and then personalities are Shaquille, David Beckham, Greg Norman, and the Muhammad Ali estate. So those are like the true sports vehicles. We have other brands in the entertainment portfolio, like Marilyn Monroe, Elvis, but in terms of true sports, which is obviously my background, is Shaquille, David, Greg Norman, Sports Illustrated, and Muhammad Ali. And what we do is obviously we no different than, and what's a little different that we don't manage or represent the brands. We own the brands. It's a joint venture in perpetuity for Shaquille and Beckham and Greg Norman. It's different because I came from an agent background. It's a different mindset. It's no longer about just what a transaction is. It's more, what are you doing for brand longevity? What are you doing that is going to keep the brand relevant and current for the long run, as opposed to just trying to do a transaction and get the most money, which I'm not saying that was our philosophy, prior to Authentic, but that, really it's a brand that we own forever. And so you want to make sure that you're doing the right deals and making the right partnerships that will extend it.
I want to talk about Shaq a little bit. The last time you and I got together, you told me a story about Shaq that I still think of this to this day, and it makes me laugh every time I think about it. I'm not going to ask you to repeat that, but it did have to do with his role with Papa John's. If you want to, you can relate that story. But you've worked with Shaq now for a while, including kind of when you were more managing him, and he has one of the most enviable endorsement rosters and business partnership rosters where he's on the board. What have you done over time, including now at your time with Authentic, to help support that and turn him into this behemoth businessman?
Yeah. Well, thank you. But look, it starts with him. I mean, every day he's a seeker. I mean, he's always looking for the next opportunity. He's he's very curious. But like the reason we did the deal with Authentic, Perry and I in 2015, Shaquille had retired for 4 years. His business was continuing to go up, because what we learned quickly was after he retired, he still had a platform. He was on Inside the NBA. He was on the #1 show, which was more like an entertainment show, which showcased his personality, and he had time. When you're playing, you're busy, and during the regular season, there's only a certain number of days that you can actually try to fit in your partners, and in the summer everything gets condensed. So we just had more time with Shaquille, but we then realized that we needed to pivot his business from making money when he was working to making money when he was sleeping. We needed to build his licensing business. We felt that Shaquille was unique in the sense of he owned his own IP. It was not attached to a Nike or an Adidas or Reebok. It was his own brand. And Perry and I had built a licensing business, but it was they were separate businesses. There wasn't running like a brand. We were running him like a brand, but the licensing business wasn't as cohesive. Perry said it was like we had an orchestra, we had individual instruments, we didn't have a conductor doing it. So when we sought out to find a partner that we thought could help us build a licensing business, and that's when we found Authentic. And that's what's been I would say the biggest growth engine for him. It was a different mindset, building a global licensing business. His licensing business this year at retail of products that have his name, he gets a royalty on, will do almost $400 million globally, which is remarkable. And that could be from footwear and apparel, that could be food and beverage, that could be in the home category. So for him, he's always wanting to do more. So we're doing more and more of the licensing side of the business. There's really 3 parts to his business. There's the traditional endorsements, the Papa John's of the world. Papa John's a little different because he took equity, he's a franchise owner, and he was on the board. But traditional endorsements, the general, ICI has been for 22 years. Those are sort of, core to his business. Then you have the second vertical, which is his licensing business, which is, again, an area that we are incredibly focused on growing. And partnering with Authentic was huge because we now have a global infrastructure, right? We have offices in Shanghai, we have offices in Brazil, we have offices in London. So they're out there helping, runs through me in terms of understanding that it's on brand, but we have an international business development team out there. And then the third is the entertainment side of the business. So we kind of just try to stay in those lanes. Like, what are the core endorsement partners that we want to have, because it's part of his business and brands that he cares about, products that he uses, focusing on the licensing business, and then growing the entertainment side of the business.
If you don't mind, Colin, I'd like to go back to David Beckham for a moment. He has not played competitive football since 2013, but yet he remains very much in demand as an endorser and brand ambassador and investor. What do you think it is that keeps David Beckham so relevant, and how does Authentic Brands play a role in that?
Well, when we evaluate if there is a living personality that we want to partner with, like we just partnered with Kevin Hart earlier this year, which is a big sort of step for us in the true entertainment side of the business. Shaquille and David were retired. Kevin is like in the middle of his career from an entertainment standpoint. But there's 3 criteria that you need to have. There's a lot of famous people. There's not a lot of people that are brand. There's a difference between famous and being a brand. You have to have a licensing business. You have to have something that you have products that you can move based on your IP, not just an endorsement. David had that. The second is you have to have a platform, right? How are you staying relevant? How are you staying current? He's got 150 million social media followers. He's an owner of the Miami MLS team. He's very, very active. He's very current. He has a platform. And the third is, do you want to work, or are you looking to cash out? And David, really checked all 3 of those boxes. So for him, he's a tireless worker. He's incredibly likable. Like, when we partner with these living personalities, you've got decades of experience, right? Of knowing, are these people flash in the pan? Or are they likable? Is the brand have elasticity? And so David and the company had been talking to David for 5 or 6 years. This is not it's not a straightforward transaction. This is something that's very, like I said, it's in perpetuity. So for him, it was, he had the platform, he had the business mind that he wanted to continue to grow. But I'd be lying if his documentary here in the U.S., Netflix, absolutely catapulted his business in the U.S. for sure. I mean, he was obviously had a incredible business in Europe and in Asia, but in the U.S., absolutely, the Netflix documentary was a pivotal moment for his career. But I think for him, he's very relevant. He's very current. He's very active, and people like working with him. He's as genuine as they come. He's very much like he just has his own style, like Shaquille, but they're very similar of their work ethic, their likability, and their interest in business.
He's almost surprisingly likable, isn't he? I remember I met him in Qatar. He was doing an ambassador program, and he had all kinds of people around him. Our mutual friend, Ken Christian, made sure I had a chance. And he was so delightful with the guests that I brought in, even though there was tons of people. Anyway, I mean, we see a lot of celebrities in this business and have met a lot. And he's one that you would almost go, I could understand why he would be standoffish. And he's not.
Yeah.
And I think he does have that likability factor.
Very genuine.
I want to jump back to we talked about SI a little bit, obviously an iconic brand. You guys acquired those rights in 2019 or acquired the brand. Give us a few of the highlights of things that you have done to catapult that brand into even further relevance today beyond what had been known primarily as its editorial expertise.
Yeah, well, you touched it. We viewed it as a brand. We didn't view it as a magazine. We viewed it as a brand. The companies that we look at are brands. They're not just companies or products. And when we bought it from Meredith, I remember having the very first meeting with Jamie, our CEO, and our business development team, and the questions that we were asking about verticals and different parts that we saw that the Sports Illustrated brand could go, they hadn't even thought of. They were trying to sell subscriptions, which is nothing wrong with that, trying to sell advertising. That was what their focus was. We viewed it as ultimately in this landscape, media is changing. Print media was changing incredibly fast. So we felt that if we could elevate and focus on building the Sports Illustrated brand and all these different verticals, the IP would be valuable, not just how many monthly visitors we were getting on SI.com or how many subscriptions that we were selling. So immediately we wanted to basically say we needed to have an operator, right? We needed to have an operator that was making sure that the magazine was going to, come out in time and the articles were going to be written. And then we took our business development team and said, what verticals do we want to go into? Do we want to go into ticketing? Do we want to go into events, live events? Do we want to go into hospitality? Do we want to go into food and beverage? So today, Sports Illustrated, and I'm proud to, say that our team led by our Vice Chairman, Dan Deans and Michael Sherman, we just broke ground on our Sports Illustrated hotel in Alabama, in Tuscaloosa last week. There's going to be a Sports Illustrated hotel in Tuscaloosa. Makes sense, right? If you're going to be going in town for a game, why not go to a Sports Illustrated? You know what that is. We have Sports Illustrated ticketing. So if you're going to be buying tickets, right? Sports Illustrated is the most trusted name in sports. So it's really these different verticals that we want to go into. Live experiences. We'll do over 50 Sports Illustrated live experiences around the largest sporting events. Could be the World Cup, could be the Kentucky Derby, could be the Masters, could be the US Open, could be the Super Bowl. So we want to elevate the brand and make it experiential so that you have that connection with it. And I think the team has done a really good job of taking it outside of just being a magazine and really what it is, which is an iconic brand. And also we're actually expanding it internationally too. So, we're going to Latin America, we're going to Europe, of having, that Sports Illustrated brand in Germany, in, Mexico. Like we're looking to expand that brand internationally.
As we sit here recording today, we're a few days away from the final weekend of the French Open. You started your career, cut your teeth, whatever you want to call it, as a tennis agent at SFX Sports Group, representing some of the top players. And then you moved over to work with Perry Rogers and Andre Agassi. Take us through how the opportunity with Authentic arose, and why was it a right time to branch out and extend yourself beyond tennis?
Yeah, well, I would say when I went to work with Perry in 2006, I always said that, and I lived in Vegas in 2006 to 2020. I started at SFX with David, many moons ago. And I always said that I was in the sports business at SFX. We represented, it was a very traditional representation model. I had like 30 clients, et cetera. It wasn't until I moved out to Vegas where Perry he had Shaquille, he had Andre, he had the golfer Adam Scott, he had the chef Michael Mina, that basically I learned the business of sports, where it wasn't about more. It was more about, if you have the right IP, if you have the right clients, if you have the right, partners, drill down on that. You don't need to, be on the road always recruiting. It was like, if you got the right ones, build the brands around, around the ones that you have. You don't have to always be looking to add on to it. And then when we decided to move to Authentic, it was that natural evolution where it was like, we had done what we could do with it. Now, if we really wanted to scale his business internationally, globally, either one or two things will happen. We were going to have to make a huge investment and have, offices all around the world, because Shaquille was a global athlete. He was a global icon. And if we really were going to scale it, we were going to need to bring on partners. And that's why we ultimately decided to partner with Authentic. But it went from being just in the sports business where you were, transacting and representing a lot of athletes and a lot of talent and doing the tools of the trade, traditional deals, to a total different mindset when I moved to Vegas, which was, how do you build brands around the clients that you have by not trying to just go recruit more, just to spend time. And if you got the good ones, try to build businesses around them. And then Authentic was the next evolution of like really turning it into a global business.
While we have you, and not to belabor the tennis point here, and not to put you on the spot as well, but given that we are close to the end of the slam number 2 on the tennis calendar, the players, especially top players, have been making a bit of a stance against the slams, saying that they want a larger share of the revenue coming in, and there are discussions going on. No massive boycotts or anything that were originally thought. If you could put that hat back on for a second, I'm not sure you want to. Any thoughts as to either the player's position or, kind of that situation overall?
Yeah. I think that, again, I'm not that close to it anymore, but look, if you look at what the amount of money that is in sports right now, if I'm a tennis player, right, I think that I believe that I'm one of the best athletes in the world. I'm competing on a global stage. It's a truly global sport. But I'm looking around and I'm seeing what these other athletes are making in these other sports. It's like peanuts compared to them. It's like crazy. And so I don't know if there's more money that they're going to be able to get. The slams in particular are going to be able to get from a media standpoint. It's all driven by media. Like all the revenue comes from the media deals, right? And so if the media deals are going to be kept out, the only way that the athletes or the players are most likely going to be able to earn more money is to basically get more share. And so I get why they're doing it. I think they have a point. They're going to have to be, organized and strategic about how they want to be successful in that. You can't be splintered. It's got to be a unified force, and it's got to come from the top. It's got to come from the ones that are generating the ratings and the media deals, and also they need to take a stand for. And it sounds like they are. Again, I'm not that close to it, but I can see that there's only so much leverage that they have, and this is one of them.
Yes.
It's no different than you see what the WNBA did, right? The way you can sort of increase your wages is to basically try to get share of the revenue. That's the only other way to do it.
Yeah, and you have to use your leverage when
You have to use your leverage.
when you have the opportunity to do it. Before Tim goes through our closing questions, I do have to ask you this. You were a standout tennis player yourself at Penn State.
Loose term, but yes.
No, but I don't want to ask you about tennis. I want to ask you if you think the Nittany Lions this year in football will finish above their very middling preseason ranking of like 14th or 15th, I think. Are they going to be better than that or worse than that?
I think they would be better than that. I'm obviously I'm a homer, but I think that coaching matters. And as much as I was not a Franklin hater, I actually did support him. I think that the talent on the roster was always going to get you to 8 or 9 wins, and just the nature of it. And then I think, having the right new philosophy and coaching could get us over that hump to get to that 10, 11 wins. I think right now with the transfer portal, I think we can get teams. You saw with Indiana, teams can get good. In Texas Tech, they can get good fast. But I think coaching matters, and I think there's a real sense of excitement on not necessarily going for what's the recruiting rank that you had, is like what's happening with the team you have, and what's the coaching, the X's and O's, and sort of the strategy and structure. So yeah, I would pick the over on that. I think Penn State can be, a top 10 program, because I think they have enough pieces there with the right coaching staff, and like the fan base is they're thirsty for more. Sure.
I love that you didn't punt that question at all. That was and not to use a pun, but well done, Colin.
Yeah.
All right.
Colin, we have 2 questions we'd like to ask before we let you go. These are questions we ask all our guests. The first one is,
where'd your career get started? Where'd you start?
So as David said, I went to Penn State. I played tennis there. So I was friendly with our athletic director, and he helped me get an interview with ESPN like right after I graduated college. And so I flew up to Bristol, totally thought, this is it. I've made it. This is going to be the greatest. This is easy. This is unbelievable. Here I'm working. I'm up and I interviewed with 11 people in one day for like a production coordinator job. And they're like, you seem great. You have literally no work experience. You've had a paper route and you've taught tennis. That's it. And they said, go get experience and then come back. And so I was a college graduate with no work experience. And I took an unpaid internship at ProServe for a guy named Donald Dell, who's an icon in this business, as you know.
Yes.
And so I would work during the day at ProServe for free. And then I would teach tennis at night until I got hired full time. And then sort of work my way up from there. But for me, it was really starting as an unpaid intern at ProServe in Washington, D.C.
I would argue that a paper route and teaching tennis is very good work experience.
I made the same argument. I was really fortunate to get Donald at the time where, he had already sold his company. It was no longer his company. And I got him in a really, really good point where he was a true mentor to me, which was great.
Nice. And so the last question we have is, what one piece of advice would you give to somebody looking to start out in the sports industry.
Start early. Doesn't matter what people like to hire from within. They like to have experience or some connection with you from the start. So, don't do what I did. I lucked out, right? But, in your summers, start as early as your freshman or sophomore year. Just start getting into the world. Doesn't make a difference. You could be working for your local AAA baseball team. It could be something at your school in the sports program. If you want to get in the sports business, everyone wants to be in the sports business. Everyone wants to be a sports agent. Everyone wants to do this. So the more that you can sort of get a leg up and get some experience that someone can then vouch for you or someone can introduce you to someone else, that's what I always tell people when I go back and I talk to people at Penn State that want to how do I start early? Start early. I have an intern program now specifically for that. I don't need an intern. I want to do it because, it's something that's how I got my start, and I want people to get exposure. And another thing too is the sports business is a really, really broad business, right? It could be, when I have interns, they come and they say, I want to be a sports agent, and they sit and they're like, I can't even fathom how much you talk on the phone. I could never do that. And they realize they don't want to do that. Or they realize, I don't want to negotiate with the brand. I don't want to be on the brand side, right? I'd rather be on the consultant side. I want to be on the event side. I want to go to law school. So there's so many different areas inside the sports business. You can start eliminating some that you don't want to do. Also, you can start identifying the ones that you really have an interest in.
Great advice. Colin Smeaton, President, Authentic Studios. Thank you for giving us the background on that vertical and that important piece of business, and also an overview on Authentic Brands Group. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
All right.
See you guys.
All right, we are back. Thanks again to Colin Smeaton, President of Authentic Studios. Great to chat with him. I want to give one more quick shout out to Ken Christian, who was a friend and also a former ProServe SFX guy, who was the person that thought it might make sense to have Colin on, and I think he was right. So we are at that time of the show where we take a little peek ahead, give shout outs or whatever the hell else we really want to talk about as the show comes to comes close to a close. So Tim, what do you have your eye on?
So a couple things. I want to give a shout out to LIV golfer Jon Rahm, who, when asked whether he would help secure new investors for LIV, which obviously is their number one priority, said, "I know nothing about business." And I just thought it was very refreshing for somebody to admit where their core competency ended. So kudos to Jon Rahm. What am I looking for? Serena Williams is back.
Yeah.
She's going to be playing 43 years old, hasn't played competitive tennis in a couple of years. She's going to be playing in the Queen's Club Championships as a doubles player. And so it'll be very interesting to see how she does. She's been away from the sport for a few years. She's been an outstanding endorser for a number of brands, probably most recently and notably as it relates to performance. She's taken one of those weight-reducing drugs through the company Ro. What do they call it? LPT1, L1, whatever they call it. You know what I'm saying? Like Ozempic or Goes, whatever. So we'll see if her new body, for lack of a better term, helps overcome not having played competitively for a number of years. So it'll be great. I'd love to see her do well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she's been amazing. I think we are both lucky to have seen her play in her prime and what she accomplished as a tennis player, of course, along with her sister Venus as well. I think most people kind of consider her the GOAT of women's tennis. Quick shout out for me, former guest. I like to keep tabs on our past guests. Became a point of discussion between the two of us, Tim, last night, and that's Tom Fox, who is just announced taking the COO role of a new MMA entity headed by former Bellator president Scott Coker. The series or league has not been named yet, but they certainly have a good one in Tom Fox. There's no doubt about that. Now, the question, of course, is going to be, can anyone compete with what Dana White and TKO are building in UFC and all of the kind of the heft that they have in that space? we shall see. But, Tom Fox isn't a bad one to have on your team trying to build something. No doubt about that.
Certainly not.
I don't mean to keep bringing this up because of the, being a Chicago Bears fan, but Caleb Williams is the new cover boy of Madden.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about Sports Illustrated. Sports Illustrated has a famous jinx. Madden has a curse, or typically does. So I'm hoping this is the opposite this year with Caleb Williams, the star quarterback of the Chicago Bears. And I'm hoping that because in addition to the great pose they have of Caleb Williams on the cover, they have an outline of the city of Chicago in the background. And the stadium situation there continues to be in the news. The state legislature went into recess without making any moves toward an Arlington Heights stadium deal. The city seems to be a little back. Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, is coming back and saying that all of the things that bill proposed for the state were in place by the city, which would be basically a lease-to-own situation for the Bears with some benefit, but without pinning things on taxpayers. Hammond, Indiana, that is saying, we've already offered something great. If they do end up staying in Chicago somehow, they're taking a lesser deal. So the question will be is what the Bears do. They continue to say by summer they will have made a decision. So we will see if the curse undoes itself. And having Caleb Williams is a positive thing for the Chicago Bears, and that he doesn't break his leg tomorrow.
Yeah.
Which
Hammond Bears just doesn't have the same ring to it.
Yeah, and they're going to try to call themselves the Chicago Bears under the same way that Kansas City Chiefs will still be the Kansas City Chiefs, or the New York Jets and Giants are the same. But right. But you're right. It would be lame, and I would hate it. All right, that's it. That's a wrap. Again, thanks to Colin Smeaton. Tim, thank you. Enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate all the listeners. We really do. Follow us. Hit the like buttons, hit the shares, engage with us, check us out on LinkedIn. You can certainly also go to dpandmcgee.com. With that, until next time, I'm DP, he's McGee. We'll talk soon.